Welcome back to Krown's Crypto Cave as I wake at this ungodly hour on this very early morning in Helsinki, Finland. As always, want to be wishing you the best of the best before we get into this one. And I do want to follow up on yesterday's short-term and medium-term analysis. Bitcoin coming back down to that 11,500 support, bouncing up rather aggressively. So where does that lead us on for the rest of the day or the next really trading week, essentially? Well, we'll be talking about that, of course. And then more importantly, let's put the folks once again on the Krown Trading application, which we found at app.krowntrading.net, and it's free. So take advantage of it. Anyways, open interest still kind of around the same area that we saw yesterday, that just under 2.5 billion with a B marker, which is still going to be that sort of interplay between what we're looking for on a breakage of the high term time frame range to the upside or the downside, for example, for instance, because, well, with the advent of the last 24 hours, we do have plenty of things to talk about as far as change around the long term analysis, of course. So with that in mind, we're looking for a breakage of this range that we've seen between about 2.5 billion and about 2.2 billion of what we saw for the last short-term range. That should be the nice interplay that we're looking for. And then more importantly, we want to line that up with major levels being broken, plus volume also further confirming or denying any sort of move that we do see. On top of that, we do see that Bitcoin dominance coming down actually from yesterday to today. I believe that we were at just under 61% yesterday, now at 60.25%. So altcoins doing rather well versus the Bitcoin pairing, which is still indicative that we are seeing rotations in the crypto market, and looking at, and also just the greater world markets that be, and then also looking at the fear and greed index, Bitcoin popping up 6 points, very aggressive, from a 78 read to an 84 read. I believe that this is the highest read that we've seen on this to date for like the last 6 months. We can go reference this chart over here, and yes, indeed it is. The prior high that we saw in this run was actually an 80 read, now getting into an 84 read, which, if you're looking at this as a chart, it actually looks like a rather constructive chart, flagging out and breaking to the upside. Does that follow through with price action as well? I don't necessarily think that it works like that, but I do think that it is interesting nonetheless. And more importantly, what we've seen historically speaking, however, it's not going to be shown on this chart right here because we've only been mining this data for the past few months, is that anytime that we get into the mid to low 90s is when it traditionally is, rather frothy from the, from that run's perspective. Anyways, looking at the global funding rate as well, still inconsequential. 0.03% is not a consideration for anyone really. Above 0.1, a little bit of a consideration. 0.1.5, and then we got then we got decisions to be made essentially if you are holding those long-term longs at that point, and works to the downside as well for a negative rate. Anyways, other than that, we should go check out the indicators tab, of which looks like it's under construction right now. So by the way, Morinfall is back and back in action. He's been getting settled into a new country and bringing his family over and dealing with all the lovely things that you have to fucking deal with when moving countries, of which I know plenty of, as I've moved countries 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years. Kind of crazy when I do think about it, but it's all for good, I guess. And he'll be back with his Jewel videos soon enough. So probably just another few days, and he'll get himself more situated there. So I just spoke with him yesterday, and all is well and good. Just working through the bullshit that you typically have to. All right, so let's go into the actual price action charts here, and starting off with the daily. I do want to start off with this because still the bias and interpretation from this is still essentially angled to the upside, even with yesterday's daily dump from 12,000 to about 11,500. Just hitting our bottom side support of this region really doesn't change anything for myself, and more importantly, we've seen this sort of interplay on both runs to the upside and the downside, and this is just, this is the same sort of knowledge applies basically all markets in the way that whenever you have a move like this, for example, let me take everything off, get naked on these charts. Whenever you have a move like this where from top to bottom on this prior dump that we saw about a week ago, I believe it was a week and a half ago maybe, initially in about 5 minutes most of this move was done, right? All the way from about 12,000 down to 10,500, a $1,500 move, which was minus 12% from top to bottom. But realistically, within, by closing time, and most of it was really done within the next hour or two, only 6% of that essentially remained, and actually a little bit less than that, 5.8. So realistically, what are we looking at here? When you dump this hard, but then close, even less than half of that, above, above the bottom of that dump, it does imply that, the buying pressure is real. And we kind of see the same thing going on over here as well, where Bitcoin dumps really aggressively, $500, a 4.72% move to the downside, but then really closes most of it, in the next couple hours, less than half that at just over 2% right here, as you can see. So to me, that does suggest that, it's one of those things that you might even call buying the fucking dip. But at the end of the day, the levels are still more or less the same. So while that is a little bit more opinion based and a little bit more market sentiment based, I suppose, at the end of the day, still more or less the same range that we've been looking at for the past week or so, with 11.5 pivot kind of governing the short and medium term to the downside, or more so the medium term. We did see the short term move yesterday. Remember that we said Bitcoin going back down below 11,900 probably does initiate another move towards 11.5. That did happen, although I couldn't have told you that it happened, at the time. Just more or less the next half day worth of price action, or the next 4 hours worth of price action, did confirm that move. So now Bitcoin kind of goes back into the same area that we've been looking at for the past couple days, which essentially applies the same sort of thing. So I don't really have anything new to add right there, but what we can do now with the last couple days worth of price action is come up with a slightly different range on the top side for Bitcoin. Not to say that this current range that we're looking at the top side breakout is still relevant. It still is actually relevant, but only to the short-term timeframes, because it was built off of a 4-hour right here, and I'd still stick with the same interpretation, essentially, that if Bitcoin does close a 4-hour dildo anywhere above what is this area right here, about $12,050, and I would look for extension another $500, maybe $600, as this does have a measure move to a 12.5 to 12,600-ish target right here, which is actually obviously much higher than this blue box that I have. That's obviously because it is relevant to a 2-day liquid zone and 3-day liquid zone that we've been marking off ever since this area coming back. What is this area? Coming back in July 2019 run right here. So, yes, July 2019. That's right. So if we were to make this on a 4-hour, then it probably would look a little bit more like this, where we flip it around. And it's a range more or less between 12,500 to 12,600, a nice $100 range, if and when Bitcoin does actually complete this formation right here, which is shaping up as an ascending triangle. Again, the dump that we saw yesterday, and also on the 7th of August, and of course the infamous one that we saw just about a week ago on the 1st of August, that $1,500 dump right here, all coming down to the same sort of trend line that is marking off the higher lows for what would be an ascending triangle. So as long as Bitcoin's wedged into this formation right here, I do have an overall bullish interpretation, because statistically speaking, these are more likely to break out to the upside than the downside. Doesn't mean that it can't break out to the downside. I've seen every fucking pattern break out every goddamn which way that it's technically not supposed to. So that's why, as you know, if I am going to play patterns, which I typically do not, I'm really only playing support and resistance to begin with. I think it's better to to take a deductive process and simplify these sorts of things, because there's no guarantee, especially in cryptocurrency land. But if there is one formation that I do see work out more than others in cryptocurrency land, it is, it's actually triangles, especially the descending and ascending varieties. So in this case right here, the interpretation is essentially the same. I don't have anything new to add onto the short-term time frame or medium-term. Actually, no, we can talk about the short-term time frame. The medium-term time frame analysis is the same. 4-hour closure above $12,050. I'm targeting to move another $500, $600 to the upside. This is not finished. I'm not a French advisor, blah, 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 blah. Go fuck yourself, SEC. And with a smile on your face. Anyways, you can't get mad if it's like that, right? Anyways, same thing to the downside as well, except because we have yesterday's dump dildo party, this massive girthy red dildo that we saw right here, which was at, technically, why would it say it's at 3 a.m. my time? I saw this one in real time. Okay. What? That can't be right. Oh, okay. That's on the close, obviously. Okay, gotcha. All right. Anyways, my point is that two ways to get the downside right here, or constitute a break of the medium-term time frame area that we're looking at, which would insinuate another move back down to our bottom side liquid zone of the long-term range here between about 11,000 and 10.9. We'll just refer to it at 11,000, but understand it's a $100 range at the upper $10,000 region. Anyways, what we could do is we could use yesterday's low for an aggressive area, which is on BitMexico not only, but 11,435 and a half tick. That probably does it, to be fair. But if we go over here to Stamp, for example, they are actually much higher, almost $100 higher And I think all major exchanges kind of agree with this right now at showing a bottom price of a bottom traded price of 11,510. Let's see what GDAX says. GDAX says 11,470. Okay, so actually we do see quite a difference right here. Stamp also show, or sorry, not Stamp, but Finex showing 11,450. So actually, actually none of them really agree with each other. It's kind of strange. Don't really see that all the time. Bifurcated market, I guess, as derivatives and spot trading slightly differ here. Anyways, a move below yesterday's wick on your exchange of whatever exchange that you're watching, and then preferably all major exchanges follow through at the same time, then yes, I probably would be looking for another $500-$600 move back down here into this range. That's obviously, in my opinion, very tradable as well. Well, that's $500, $500 on a medium term range. I mean, that's just unreal opportunity. Realistically, how fucking spoiled are we as traders, as moon boys and doom boys? Well, it's probably not enough, because you need like fucking thousands of X's and thousands of percentages to do whatever those people want to do. But that's not what this channel is really focused on. Not that I discriminate or hate against those sorts of people. They're obviously welcome here. Just understand my sort of perspective as a trader, not as like a long-term investor or a long-term like naysayer or anything like that. The market ebbs and flows, and as a trader, well, have to be able to kind of be be variable in that regard. So that way probably actually does get things. Although it is admittedly a more aggressive way, I think the more conservative way would be to wait for a 2-hour dildo at the very least closure below this 11,500 area right here. If that does happen, then yes, I'd look for a move back down to low 11,000s, somewhere around 11,000, give or take about $100 is essentially what I'd be looking at. But because of the way that the daily closed yesterday, and because of the aggressive buying up of that wick, I actually don't think that I don't think that that's what's happening. Could Bitcoin get another test back down there? Yeah, not problematic until it actually fully and formally breaks. But as it stands right now, this is your daily, and the daily did close on new highs on this run. This is not just on spot price action, but also on CMEs as well. Or sorry, actually no, it's not on CMEs. Although we did have a new overall higher trading price on yesterday's wick to the upside, but not a higher close. But it is present on spot price action. And as long as we're closing daily dildos, especially above 11,800, I mean, this does look like it's going to give another try to the upside to me, as we said was likely yesterday. So I do think that yesterday's dump being bought up essentially back onto weekly supports, which, if you remember, the relevancy of that 11,500 area is not just the medium term timeframes. It actually has much greater implications on macro areas, namely the weekly, of which we essentially just backfilled that 11,500-ish region, the same region that Bitcoin's been selling off of for the last 3 years. This time it gets bought back on up, and Bitcoin plays in the higher $11,000 range on the short-term timeframes. Now, obviously, we want to be judging a weekly on a weekly, but when we're talking 2 days into the trading week, we can only really do the best that we can, and that's when the short-term and medium-term timeframes do hold a little more relevancy, because that's really all that you have. But looking at this right here, we can see that Bitcoin just backtested the bottom side of this of the macro liquid zone, the same area that, like I said, that Bitcoin's been selling off of ever since January 2018. This is a historical area and has greater implications, as it does imply that big institutions have been getting their shortfalls within this region. This is institutional order flow dynamics at play, and I feel extremely strongly about that. Anytime that you see big moves away from an area like this, both to the upside or downside, obviously in this case it would be to the downside, you get these spikes up in here, and then over the next few weeks, just massive moves to the downside from this region. First one coming in obviously early January. Wait, motherfucker, can you work? Giving about 50% move to the downside almost immediately. Then a few weeks later, checks it again, and then sells off 73.5% overall. Then it does it about a year later and sells off another 55%. And in this time now, actually taking out that last traded high on a weekly closure, I do think holds a lot more weight, and it's also lining up with major fibs areas, and also obviously major historical horizontals. And also, if we put on the volume profile, you'll notice as well that this is of a different nature above this region, as the volume profile suggests that if you think Bitcoin was volatile in the mid and low 11,000s, then it's going to get even more crazy above this region, of which we did confirm with last week's closure. So that is very much a big focus of what I'm looking at right now, because to me it does look like Bitcoin Bitcoin just retested, the weekly open essentially, or not the weekly open, but Friday's closure essentially, which was which I don't know if CME actually did print a gap there. I'm curious to see. Actually, yeah, they did. Fills the gap almost perfectly. Very low time frame though. I don't really put too much weight on it, to be honest with you. I wouldn't consider that like a traditional gap fill for what it's worth, but it's still a weekly and long term and macro area, and so I would go with the same bias, and essentially there's no real reason in my opinion to change around that bias, especially as long as we're closing 12-hour and daily dildos above 11,800-ish region. As long as that criteria is maintained, this still looks like higher highs and higher lows to me, which is quite literally an uptrend. And we do see momentum oscillators agreeing with that. Daily Stokes are up. Now, to be 100% clear, it is a little bit of a do or die situation right here, implying that if Bitcoin fails to get continuation, probably in these next few days, gravity will very likely take over once again. But looking at it right here, if Bitcoin does close today's daily dildo basically below 11,800, it will turn daily momentum to the downside. So if daily momentum turns to the downside while also breaking the daily level at 11,800, that last or the second to last higher daily closing high on this run right here, then yes, Bitcoin probably does end up coming down and at the very least test 11,500 again. And then you already know my thoughts. If Bitcoin breaks 11,500, even on a 2-hour dildo, looking for another $500, $600 move to the downside with potential for more. If Bitcoin does close below 10,000 or just basically 11,000, then I'd be looking for another over $1,000 move to the downside below 10,000 once again. And that'd probably make a lot of people very happy, because I love doing YouTube for just one reason, because you get to see the absolute extremes on both ends of the spectrum for people who are caught in gangs. There's been one person who's posted on my videos for like literally two and a half years straight, talking about like always the positive things and always about how Bitcoin's and Litecoin are going to the moon. I don't know why you picked Litecoin, but Bitcoin and Litecoin going to the moon because of like X, Y, and Z non-fundamental issues. And then more recently, for example, there's been this guy who like fucking promises a dump every goddamn day, saying, "Sorry, Krown, you're wrong, and Bitcoin's going to fucking zero." No, it's not. Bitcoin's going to zero, but I think he keeps on saying that Bitcoin's going to have a catastrophic dump, and maybe it does. But as far as charts go, I mean, this is kind of like you join a gang when you're saying the same fucking thing every goddamn day, all the way from here at about 9,300 to here at 3,000 bucks later at about 12,000. So at the end of the day, man, understand that this channel is focused on traders. That's not what we do here. Or I don't really know anyone successful who's like trying to crystal ball price action to begin with. But yes, if Bitcoin does break below 11,000, essentially, I would be looking for a nice move down to this region. But again, it's level by level, and I actually do not think that that's what's happening here. I do think that Bitcoin's going to get another drive to the upside. I know a lot of people are talking about the 12-hour Joule sell signal. I don't believe that actually plays out, because we don't see it on CMEs. At least we don't see it perfectly on CMEs just yet. I'd wait for it to kind of appear on CMEs, which it will be lining up. You can see that it's really a matter of time before it does initiate that, and it will be rather powerful. And actually, you could even argue that maybe it's lining up right now. But again, it would still only be initiated by, at least in my opinion, tradable by breaking those levels while also having those signals present. That's when, I actually do think that we could have a pretty massive move to the downside here. But for right now, it's quite literally just an uptrend. Yes, there is bearish divergence, like very aggressively forming here, to be fair. But also major hidden bullish divergence that we saw yesterday, although I believe that that's already played out. Yeah, we saw that move from 11,000 to 12,000 on CMEs. I think that you could say that that's played out already back to the top side of the range, and we are seeing 12-hour Stokes coming down as well. So it is a little bit of a, like I said, it's a little bit of a ticking time bomb. This would imply that Bitcoin needs to get continuation like in the next few days, really, and preferably today, if it is going to keep its more immediate bullish hopes alive. Otherwise, most momentum oscillators will start to turn down, as we saw leading in with the daily at 11,800. If we go to the 12-hour momentum turns to the downside, or sorry, it's already turned to the down. No, it's still up, but it will turn to the downside below essentially the same area at 11,785, just 15 bucks lower. And I imagine that the 10-hour is going to be leading that, as it's actually already down and will stay to the downside as long as below 11,900. So the 10-hour obviously closes 2 hours before the 12-hour, and so I'd expect that if Bitcoin is going to continue upwards and onwards here, it will close above that level. or at least, it would be 10, basically 11,900 to keep the momentum up to the upside. Now, I would say that the same sort of sell signal is lining up here too, but what I really want to see is I want to see all of these get negative slopes at the same time. And someone asked a really good question in the Jewel channel yesterday about that, and yes, that sort of intuition is correct, or at least the way that I've seen the best signals play out is you want to see everything move together. Now, when they're flat, meaning the pink and the yellow, or I actually have it as white, it does work out every once in a while, and that's like the most aggressive that I'll do. But if they're opposite slope than the blue, then fuck no, I do not take those. Although I do see them work out every once in a while. It's just the hit rate is not as much. And again, we're talking about statistics. So if you're looking at the statistical setups of these, the ones that work out better are the ones where they're all turning together. And right now, it's kind of like a decision phase, because you can imagine that if the next move is down, then they will naturally turn together. So that would provide a pretty damn good signal and probably be the catalyst for sending Bitcoin back down to the low 11,000s. But like I said, I want to be very direct in saying this. I'm not calling a reversal here until those criteria are met with the medium and long-term time frame ranges. Again, 11,500 and 11,000 even respectively. So for right now, I'm still actually looking for Bitcoin to stair step up. It's not really, I haven't found much success with fading trends before they actually do end. Although the 4 hours lining up for a pretty damn good one here as well. Fuck me, man. There's actually plenty lining up there. Jesus Christ. What about on CMEs? Yeah, lining up too. All right, fair enough. Maybe we do have a nice pullback inbound. But again, the levels, as I've kind of laid them out, are basically how I'd be judging that. Looking at the 4 hour right here, I want to see what momentum needs to close back above in order to flip it back to the upside, and it would be $12,000. So we are seeing that the lower time frames are naturally in the higher time frames. That's kind of what we want to see, but it would again suggest that it is a little bit of a do or die situation in the next 36 hours, I'd say. 3 hours showing 11,800 to flip momentum back up to the upside, bi-hourly showing 11.9, and hourly showing 11.9 as well. So all of these are interplayed in the same area. We don't see these sorts of forms of opportunity come up all that often, so it would suggest that basically all timeframes up to a daily are essentially in concert right now, and Bitcoin's going to make a big decision relatively soon. Personally speaking, if it wasn't for the Jewel, I'd say if it wasn't for the Jewel, I would say up, but the Jewel is actually like lining up for good sell signals on just about every time frame, which is kind of scary. So if there's anything that does make me a little bit concerned, it is certainly that. However, to counteract that, I would say that the weekly Jewel is on the other side of that equation, and so is the monthly. So the macro timeframes still not in concert with it, but lower than that, yes. So how does that line up? Well, I tend to put more weight on the higher term timeframes, of which the weekly is given a hodl your long signal right here. And again, that was coming off of a retest of the macro area being broken. So I do find that will typically work out better when in doubt. Looking at daily RSI, do we see anything obvious here? I still think that this is overall a bullish read on the RSI. However, I'd like to see it close back above the exponential on the next turn if this run is going to continue. And of course, I'd imagine that's going to be at the 70 read, of which we can actually see exactly what price would be needed. And I'm going to imagine that it's probably at 11,900, 11,950 to be exact. So again, today's daily total closing above 11,009, 11,950-ish region likely does insinuate that this move does get that next leg up to 12,500, we'll call it, in a $100 range there. But for right now, it's a little bit under pressure, and failure to move, sooner rather than later is going to be indicative of pullback impending. But for right now, I still actually do remain bullish on this one. And let's go and check out, what else do we want to check out? Yeah, let's go over here to our secondary chart. And let's see what we got. Get the fuck off there. Get the fuck off there, you silly measured moves, you. And let's go on over here. And, again, I do want to follow up on this. The weekly, I tend to put a lot of weight on this. The weekly closing above the top Trollinger band while maintaining a positive slope on the, on the median Trollinger band right here. Same signature that we've seen during all major long-term ups that have produced some pretty nice results for Bitcoin, initiating like long-term upside moves. Namely, this this last one right here in April 2019, going all the way from 5,000 to 14,000. Now you will probably notice right here in February of this year, we did close above the top side Bollinger Band on this, but Krown Bitcoin didn't rally. Well, it also didn't have a positive slope at that time. On this exact tick right here, it was actually a slightly negative slope at that time, whereas this one's been building up for weeks on end and then closing above. So I do still put weight on that. You can see the same sort of read and same sort of interpretation on the whole run from 2015 to 2018, as Bitcoin does play off the top side Bollinger Band and then reaccumulates on the 20 simple. Classic shit. Same thing in 2013, same thing in 2012, same thing in early 2012 as well. So all of those runs more or less similar and of that nature. And we can take that a few steps further, which again does kind of round up my overall Bula-ish bias for now. Again, assuming that the criteria that we spoke about on those other timeframes is met. And holy shit, man, the workers are up fucking early today. They're always up early, but they're stomping on the roof right now. So if you can hear that, I do apologize. If you can't, well, consider yourself blessed, because I was actually in the sauna the other day. I was in the sauna and to explain, my apartment has its own sauna, and I was and there's a window looking outside, and then all of a sudden I see this Estonian man's face right fucking next to me as I'm there sweating balls, naked as fuck. And well, say no more. Let's talk about RSIs instead of saunas. What I can tell you about the sauna, though, is that I sit on a sauna pad, and because it can get dirty because you're just sweating the whole fucking time, right? And every day, what I do after the sauna, the day after the sauna, is I leave the pad in there, because if you take it out, it's fucking wet and gross. But if you leave it in there, then it'll just dry up. And so every once in a while, I'll smell it, and then I'm so disgusted and so disappointed with how fucking gross I am. Like, Jesus Christ. Because I'm in there for like an hour just sweating my balls off, and man, I'm glad that we live in the age of showers and bathtubs, because this world would be so fucked if everyone was walking around with their BO sticking on them. Anyways, weekly RSI. Let's talk about this for a second now as well. Same sort of read here too, kind of making an interpretation between the weekly Bollinger Band and the weekly RSI. Anytime that we see in the weekly RSI get into the bullish control zone, like on that first int, of which we did confirm in early August, by the way, just a week ago, that has been the start of long-term ups as well. Going back to April 2019, that same area probably does sound familiar, especially if you've been watching these videos for a while, is this area right here. So Bitcoin gets that first major big boost up and then trades sideways at a long-term resistance, at a macro resistance. You probably remember around this time, everyone was trying to sell 6,000 because that was the big support of 2018. Bitcoin just blew right fucking through it and did about more than a 2x after that. Well, very similar read to what we have right here. Not only do we have a similar read, but we also have a similar formation that kind of born it as well. Remember that this was a nice ascending triangle down here, as I put on my drawing tools. Same thing over here, an ascending triangle over the course of about 3 months, from May to August. This one going from December to March, April-ish region. And this was all coming during a contraction phase, a 3-month long contraction phase on historical volatility percentile, of which we got to, I wouldn't say generational lows on the last one, but we got to historical lows for sure, contracting all the way down to single digits for multiple weeks on end in early 2019. Same thing obviously in the more recent times as well, even more aggressively, all the way from basically to a zero read and then popping up. And this is still expanding right here. We're still maintaining above actually we're gonna have a chance to not maintain above the positive slope on this. So if there are warning signals, that is it for sure. And of course, this sort of same read is mediated all the way back here as well. Anytime that we've seen weekly RSI go into the bullish control zone, that has been your nice ups. That was all of these up moves during the run from 2016 to 2017. Whoops, let's go to the weekly. I think it's obviously going to make more sense there, and that's why it was looking very strange to my eye. But yeah, all these reads into the bullish control zone, starting right here on this run, then again right here on this run, again right here on this whole run, then again right here on this whole run, and again right here, again right here, again right here. All of them marking off major lows before big moves to the upside. Well, I do happen to put quite a bit of weight on that, and again, same thing going back to the genesis. Essentially, you'll notice that Bitcoin gets into the bullish control zone back here in 2013. Boom, massive move to the upside. So I do think that all of the things being equal and all of the criteria being met, Bitcoin's still likely to give another try to the upside here before playing out some more long-term consolidation sideways and down. Looking at weekly momentum oscillators, we see the same sort of thing as well. Weekly Stokes are getting back into the critical zone, or at least going to have a chance to confirm in there later this week. And we've seen the same sort of interplay there as well between the last few runs. Anytime that we get into the critical zone, that is actually the beginning of those same sorts of runs, giving you a slightly faster lead. So it is a faster derivative, so to speak, and telling you to enter in long right here if you are playing the historical area of that. Of course, obviously going back to the whole run from 2016 to 2017, or sorry, 2015 to 2017ish region. All of these stints above the above the critical zone were those same sorts of ups that we spoke about before, and basically they all kind of match up. And again, we're talking about historical levels here, so at the end of the day, I do happen to think that Bitcoin is going to get another try to the upside. But this is, we're now into the TA nerd session of this video because we're fucking 30 minutes into it, and I haven't even spoken about world markets. Holy fuck. Let's go look at probabilities really quick. But at the end of the day, levels are what I use to trade, and then all those other tools kind of round out the bias, but they would still suggest up. And also look at this, just before we even look at the probabilities, the rings on this are still maintaining a positive slope. In fact, even increasing the positive slope as Balian Pig's moms turns up right here, at the same time gaining momentum, and the error correcting moms is looking like it's losing momentum to the downside as well. So both of those things in unison, and guess what? Guess what our above target probability is for 12,000 on today's daily total closure? Just over 41%. 41% versus the downside resolution, not for the long term. Not for the long term. This is only relevant for the medium term. Once again, that 11,500-ish region, showing 22.14%, which is actually very, very high, relatively speaking. But with the above target probability doubling that, it would say that statistically speaking, we're more likely to break out to the upside than the downside. Obviously, that's in line with the proverbial ascending triangle that we're looking at, a bullish reaccumulation formation, plus all the other things that we just looked at on derivatives of price action, and further verified by just straight up math with regards to historical volatility percentile and expected moves. And we could take this a step further, because remember, these areas are not the same. 12,000 does not have the same indications as 11,500 being broken. That's only relevant for the medium term. It's 11,000, or so not 10,000, but 11,000 that does have the same implication kind of on the long term that 12,000 does. And that would show a massively different picture here of 41% versus 3.5%. Now, obviously, this is just on the next daily total closure. This will naturally shift around, if Bitcoin were to break 11,500 today, close there, and then tomorrow probably turn down, yes. But still, that is lining up with the same things that I was saying at the beginning of this video, that if Bitcoin bulls are going to take control, they very likely do it today and tomorrow if they want to keep up that immediate momentum and take advantage of it. So for right now, I do remain cautiously bullish, but that is implying that the criteria is maintained, as we just spoke about before. Looking at world markets, I want to check out how NASDAQ futures are doing, and it looks to me like they came back down and retested basically 11,000, just we spoke about yesterday. I do happen to think this, essentially the same thing on this one as I do on Bitcoin. Probably going to get another try back up. I don't really have like a great way of doing this right here. I'm just looking at fib extensions, of which it shows just the regular 2 extension at 11,400, and this is still an uptrend. So I remain bullish on this one, as I said yesterday, as long as this closing daily totals above 10,950, and we could now use yesterday's low side wick at 10,928 and a quarter as continuation for the downside, initiating targets back down at the very least to at the very least another $50, but realistically probably starts to fill out this range once again, just like Bitcoin. If that criteria was to be met, I'd really be looking at 10,750 for a short-term bounce, and probably does overall move back down after that bounce gets sold into at 10,500-ish region back down here. But for right now, I'd still remain cautiously bullish, looking at this as just an overall uptrend, and the trend is your friend until the end of the trend. And we do see that daily RSI is still more or less constructive here on the whole, but it has a lot of space to fill out, so I don't feel too comfortable calling anything immediately on that one. What I do feel more comfortable with is looking at historical volatility percentile on the daily and realizing that we are contracting the whole way through from the March lows, which suggests that if price action is moving up during that whole time, then very likely this move has more to go, which does line up with an apex actually around, does line up with a resolution point sometime around, the new president getting instated. For U.S. elections, which is kind of interesting. Anyways, looking at that right there, it would imply that, the path of least resistance is still the upside as it is right now, because it's quite literally a blue sky breakout, and that, it's typically what you do see. And looking at higher term time frames, still, things are still looking more or less fine. We did say yesterday, a backfill to last week's open at 10,950 was, rather likely, but I'd be looking at that as an opportunity. And I have the same thing to say today. I think that this one still got some more upside here. Call me fucking crazy, but as long as that criteria is met, I want to be very specific with that wording. As long as that criteria is met, I'm looking for I'm looking for this run to pop back up to the highs at 11,250 and probably beyond. It's not until we even take out yesterday's low where I even see like a red flag being thrown. And then yes, we can talk about another $500 move to the downside and come up with targets from there. But for right now, is there bearish divergence confirmed on the daily? Yes, actually there is. So I do also happen to think that we played that out yesterday with that whole move down, which is, this is a pretty nice move for traditional markets in one day. Obviously for Bitcoin, completely different, but we need to measure it, what it's against. And more importantly, when we go over to E-mini futures for SPY, it's very obvious here that rotations are in effect. Once again, as we've been saying for a while now, I don't mean to come off as arrogant when I say something like that, but overall, this looks like it wants to retest the prior all-time high at 3,400-ish region, and I happen to think that based off of last month's close, we probably do have an initial sell-off from there. But this is still an uptrend on the monthly and still a very strong uptrend at that. And more importantly, we have come down to the same area for the last over 10 years now, since '09, since fucking November of 2009, where traditional markets have essentially been basing off of and putting in their major lows. And guess what? We pretty much just tested that with that last month right here, as it essentially makes new all-time closing highs, which is kind of crazy to think about. Also happen to think that monthly RSI is looking rather healthy here as well, and this is probably lining up with new all-time highs as well. I mean it's hard to be bearish on a fucking uptrend. I'm curious what all of the naysayers of the doomsday people who are like, oh no, second wave going down, or this is the worst, this is worse than the Great Depression. You weren't around for the fucking Great Depression. Stop it, fucking stop it, fucking take him away, boys. This is a V-shaped recovery, and for the love of fucking God, like if people are still naysaying this, I just don't understand. I thought that it was quite obvious down around here. This is where we started to get bullish. I think that it was very obvious right around here, and then after that, I think it was more so cognitive dissonance for people just calling a fucking top every time that it goes down and puts in a higher low. I mean, it's kind of crazy shit, man. And I'm not saying that it can't reverse, but there's some very obvious ways to kind of judge that now, especially on weekly closures, which we can move this area down, which would be as long as weekly's close and above, especially 32.23. No reason to be bearish, in my opinion, at all whatsoever on the macro. But that does not mean that we can't have some down, and obviously that would offer up a pretty massive range here. So we could even go to the daily and judge that same sort of interpretation somewhere just under 3285 region, which is essentially where the daily 21 is. And guess what? That would just be another higher low coming back down around there. I'd need to see a daily closure below there before I call even like a medium-term pullback back down to this area right here. That would obviously coincide with probably the weekly breaking that critical level, and then we could talk about greater pullbacks, but still, can very easily afford a nice pullback here if it needed to, which it doesn't even look like it wants to. All momentum oscillators are still pointed northwards, and weekly RSI probably does pull back relatively soon. But does it come alongside some new highs first? I do think so, yes. Probably a short-term sell-off after the retest of 3,400, but it's pretty fucking close there already. There is bearish divergence forming on just about all time frames, so it's kind of like a do or die situation here as well. But not on the daily, actually. So funnily enough, it is not present on the daily just yet, unless you're going all the way back here, but I don't think that that's necessarily relevant. Well, it is relevant, actually, so maybe I take that back. I'd still rather go off of levels here. So I'm still looking for a formal retest of the prior all-time high at 3,400-ish region, and then probably beyond, depending upon how the weekly closes. What else we want to check out? Maybe triple Qs. How's the broad market doing? Rotations in effect. Yes, indeed. Coming back down to test supports, bouncing off. Nice. What else we want to check out? We could probably check out. We could check out. I mean, we could like really do a deep dive in traditional markets, which I actually would kind of like to do at some point, looking at like NY, Indus, and all the other subsectors and whatnot. But for right now, I think this video is probably already way too fucking long. Yeah. Euro dollar backing off the same area that we spoke about, 119.5. Again, I think that it probably puts in some time around here, but over the next few months, I'd be looking for this one to come back down. I do happen to think that this is going to be a major high, especially as long as monthlies are closing below 119. I think that we had a phenomenal run to the upside. I think that we played that run quite well. I do think, though, that probably the dollar is going to start to turn up. However, looking at Dixie, it came down to essentially the same relevant level all the way down. Well, almost all the way down to the 200 exponential moving average. That does make me think that it could have another swipe down. And if it does, euro dollar probably does rally back up to like 119.5, maybe 120. But I'd still be looking for this area to kind of grind it out and reaccumulate. Because long term, like 5 years, 10 years down the road, this looks like a chart that's been under heavy accumulation for a very long time. But we're talking like 5-10 years. That's not relevant for today. Gold, what's gold doing? Little toppy here as well. Still no bearish divergence in play. Potential hidden bullish divergence going to initiate soon too, as we are making lower lows on RSI. Bench that this is even more aggressive on the 12-hour. Yes, indeed it is. Going all the way back here to 1950 ticks. So, short term, does it come back down officially to 2000 and test that area and then bounce off it? Probably, yeah. So I'd be looking for some short term down, then bounce off of 2000, then we'll come back after that. I don't feel so comfortable with gold because, well, looking at the weekly, I do. A backfill on last week's open at 1975-ish region, probably fine. But like I said, I'll be looking at that as an opportunity. It still looks like the run's still going here. I know that sounds crazy, but I'd still need to see at the very least bearish divergence on the daily before I even call a pullback, and that we haven't gotten that yet. So yeah, short term down, but I do think that it will bounce off that region. What about Link? We can go take a quick look at Linky Links and what's the good old Links doing. Yeah, starting to show some, well, still no bearish divergence on a fucking daily. It's kind of crazy. It does look a little bit short-term toppy, but long-term, again, an uptrend is your friend. And the weekly says more new all-time highs. So I do believe we still have this 3.618 extension to get towards, but no, that's kind of already been tested at 1415, the same area that we targeted out last week. Next area I'd have on my charts, and I really don't like saying this, is 16.31.5 cents. Does it hit that before it does put in a greater pullback? I mean, the weekly suggests so, yes. We do have bearish divergence forming here, but the way that we closed last week, I mean, we just came back down and tested supports. It probably gives another try to the upside. Probably makes some new all-time highs first, and then some sideways, some potential down. But I'd at the very least look for some prolonged sideways. Oh, I want to cover up Tesla as well. I got so much fucking shit for calling major highs on Tesla about a month or two ago, or whatever this was. Yeah, early July. Well, while everything else in the fucking world is rallying, Tesla seems to be barely holding on to this descending triangle on the bottom side support, 1420, still the critical closure. If it does break there on any sort of a daily little closure, even probably like a 2 hour or hourly, I'd be looking for extension back down to low 1200 and 1100 over time. Again, very similar chart to what we've seen in Bitcoin in 2017. Very fucking similar. Major parabolic highs. Everyone's ready to buy and spend some time going sideways. I'd still be looking for another move down, another move down overall. And I do happen to think that it will lead into other markets as well, and I'd be bearish on this, especially as long as it's below the blue box right here at 1530, and even this descending trend line at 1490 and coming down aggressively this week. So it is actually insinuating resolution probably around Friday, actually Thursday, Friday, very likely, statistically speaking. So all that's in the cards, and that would initiate a move very likely down here to like 1200-ish region. So Tesla, I still stick with my top call there, and I don't really have any reason to change it, especially as long as we're below this area, just like I said. So if this area does get taken out, then yeah, we could have something else going on. I want to see it in real time if that did happen. But as long as we're below there, yes, very very extremely likely the top is in. Do we want to check out other shitcoins? No, we don't. Mr. B-Draw for a second. Why not, man? Why not? Where are you, you little bastard, you? Looks similar to Bitcoin, wedging itself into an ascending triangle near the top side. Does look like it's a little bit short-term toppy, kind of like Bitcoin as well. Maybe comes back down and tests around 385, but 385 is like the same interpretation as 11.5 for Bitcoin, and 11,000 for Bitcoin is the same interpretation as this 375 low right here. If that area does break, I'll be looking for moves back down to 340. Like nasty moves back down there, and probably more over time. And to the upside, if we do break above 400, I'd extend that. I'd extend short-term targets to 420, and probably long-term targets still looking at like 460. I think it was. Yeah, this blue box right here. So fair enough. All that's still in the cards. Let's go back to Bitcoin and wrap this bitch up. Still looking at 1250 on a 4-hour closure to the upside, or a daily above 11.9 probably does it as well, or 11.850 I believe it was. Yeah, it was 11.850. Yeah, 11.850. Although it doesn't necessarily imply, I'd probably want to see a daily closure, or sorry, a 4-hour closure above the level that we just mentioned. By the same token, do we have any divergences to be aware of here? No, not really. 4-hour RSI is really neutral, anyways. That's what does make me think that Bitcoin still continues up here as well. But hey, if 11.5 breaks to the downside, I'm not. Yeah, if 11.5 breaks to the downside, I would look for another move down here, another $500, $600 move. This area is relevant for the long term, though. If this area does break on even like a 12-hour, I would be looking for back down below 10,000. I don't think that that's what's happening right now. I do favor the upside here, and I do happen to think that this is going to get resolved this week. But again, that's just my opinion. I do not trade my opinion as far as my trading behaviors go. It's more or less based off of very simple things like what you're seeing right here. And that's really all that I have to say for today. I'd like to wish you all once again, take care, and until next time.